Going to now talk about cameras. So I've got this scene that I created, and just some review that the view we're looking through normally is just simply the viewport view. You're not really looking through a particular created camera yet. But when you start a scene, a light and a camera are created. So this this light here, or this camera here, is the camera that's been created. All right, so and you hit 0 on your keyboard, you are looking through that camera. So we've looked at this before. Now, there are lots of times when you'd want to create more than one camera and have multiple points of view and be able to kind of lock one camera in one view and have another in another view, etc. So we're going to leave this camera as is, and we're going to just hit Shift A and create a new camera. And I'm just going to hit G to grab that camera and lift it up a little bit. So there it is. Now, let's look at the scene here. Try to get from above. Okay, so we've got the default camera, which is here, camera, and then the new one we created, which is here, and it's called camera 001. So I'm just gonna rename it new camera. That way we know. So if I hit 0 though, I'm still looking through on my keypad, I'm still looking through the original camera. And if I want to lock the camera to view, which we've gone over before, and zoom out, look from a different point of view, I can do that. And then unclick this and then go back into the viewport view, and as soon as I hit 0, so even though the new camera is selected, we're not really looking through it yet. So the way to do that is to hit Control 0 on your keyboard. Now when you hit Control 0 on your keyboard, you are now looking through the selected camera. So let me go through that again. So if I select the original camera in my outliner and I hit Control 0, I'm looking through it. If I select the new camera, so it's now the new camera selected, Control 0, and now I'm looking through it. So if I hit Lock Camera to View, I can scroll out, find a new position. So let's go to the left of this object, and we'll focus this camera on the sphere, for instance. All right, so now we've got this. So I'm going to unclick here and go into my viewport view and just take a look at the scene. So I've got my new camera looking from the left, my original camera looking from the right. And if I go to render the scene, let's see what happens. What is it going to render? So it is going to render whichever camera is currently active. And in this case, I've still left the new camera active. That looks nice. So there's another way to do it. If you let's select the old camera, the original camera, you can also go up to the top of the screen and hit View, Cameras, Set Active Object as Camera. So that does that. Now, not to confuse you, but you can probably, given I just saw that, you can probably make the view that you're looking at when you hit 0 from the point of view of any object. So if I click on Suzanne and I go to View and I say Cameras, Set Active Object as Camera, well, now we're looking through the point of view of Suzanne's head. So just so you kind of realize that you could do that. Okay, so I'm going to go select my new camera, Control 0, and now this is the active camera. Good. So notice that when you are in, when you're in a camera's view, that you're tumbling and zooming and rotating but your camera is always level, meaning that no matter what I do, the camera stays level to the scene. The way you would change that is, let's say you are looking straight on this. Oops, that was weird. I don't know why that happened. Okay, let's say you're looking straight on here, and you wanted to actually tilt your camera view so that, I don't know, let's say you were doing a animation where you were zooming in and you wanted to be kind of tilting the camera left and right. Well, you can, with the camera selected, you could literally rotate it, hit the R button, and just like any object, you could rotate it. So if I wanted to play around here a little bit, let's say at frame 1 of an animation, or 0, I'm gonna hit I and insert a keyframe there on the camera, and I'm gonna go to frame 100, zoom way in, and this will be where I end my zoom. Actually, let's go way in like this. Okay, so I'm gonna end my zoom here. I'm gonna hit I and set a keyframe. Well, in between, let's say at 30, I could go to 30, which, right, so we're zooming in. I could go to 30, and I could hit R, and I could rotate the camera, let's say this way. Hit I, and then I could go to 60, and I could hit R and rotate the camera this way. Hit I. Now, if I were to play the animation, the camera is rotating and zooming at the same time. You're actually kind of like flying, basically, something like that. So that's the way you would change the rotation of a camera. What else? Let's see. Oh, other things. When you have your camera selected, you've got the attributes here. If you click the properties, I guess they're called, and right now the default is a perspective type camera, which looks at things in terms of perspective and not orthographic. So let's do a little demonstration here. I'm going to take this ball, move it along the x-axis with a y-axis back here. So the ball and the ball and the monkey head are the same size, but of course in a perspective camera they appear to be, one appears to be smaller, and that's simply because it's further away, right? We all understand that. If you change this to orthographic, it's gonna show the scale of the object in its actual scale, not in its relative scale based on the depth. So it's a flattened view. This is used in architectural drawings and things like that. So this is a choice. If you wanted to have a very flat looking rendering, you could render something so that it was orthographic. The other thing is the focal length of the lens, and the focal length of the lens has to do with how wide of an angle it is. If it's set to a very low number, even though I'm zoomed way in here, it's really distorted. It's a very fisheye looking lens. You can get really close to things and they distort quite a bit, but you can navigate a tight space that way. If you do it the other way around, you go very long lens or telephoto lens. Well, in this case, you start to actually approach the look of an orthographic view. So let me kind of demonstrate that. So a sort of normal looking lens is going to show a distance like this. If you do telephoto, let's say 200 or something, well, now look at that ball starting to look closer to the size of the monkey head, and you start to get closer to the look of a telephoto or of an orthographic. So if I could exaggerate that even more And now you're going to see that the difference is very slight, right? Because the focal length of our lens is very long. So that's for a telephoto look, or a zoomed in perspective. So you can change the perspective of the focal length of your camera anytime. And this is another reason you might want to have more than one camera. You may want one that's got a focal length of, 250, and you might want one that's a wider angle, and you can toggle between the two and set them up in different places. Okay, so next thing we want to talk about is tracking objects with the camera. This is a very useful thing to do. So let's see. You can, there are times when you would want, lots of times actually, where no matter what you do with your object in a scene, if you were animating it or something, you would want the camera to follow it. And so for instance, if I go to, let's go back to our original camera, and I'm going to hit Control-0. So, oops. I'm going to frame it in the center. So, all right, so I've got this object framed in the center, and then I get out of this view and I go into my perspective view, and I grab this monkey head and I move it over here. Well, or scale it or do whatever. Well, now obviously it's not being tracked by the camera. I would have to click on the camera, move it over, and reframe. Okay, so that's one way of doing things. Okay, so let me undo. I don't know how far I undid there. Which camera am I in? Okay, so let's do something different. Let's follow this thing. So to do this, you have to select the camera you want to choose to track with. So I'm going to select our original camera. So I'm selecting that in the outliner. Then I go to this property called Object Constraint Properties, which is the little blue one above the green camera. And these are called constraints, and you click on Add Object Constraint, and the one we're going to choose is called Track To. So I'm tracking this camera to this monkey head. Basically, it's almost like making one follow the other. So I'm tracking to. And first you have to tell it what you want to track it to. So it's very easy. You click on this window here, it says target. So what am I tracking to? Well, I'm tracking to Suzanne. Now, don't be freaked out by this. When you do this, the scene looks blank and the camera's now in some weird orientation. So all you have to do is click on the -Z, the -Z axis as your to axis, and then your up axis is set to Y, and this should put you back in place. Good. So now what's cool about this is I'm going to turn off lock camera to view because we don't need it at this point, and if I click on the Suzanne head and I grab it, my camera follows, which is pretty neat. So if I go into my perspective view, you can actually watch it happen. So here's our camera, and here's our Suzanne head, and I'm going to grab Suzanne head and I'm going to move her along the y-axis, and the camera's turning to follow, or along the x-axis, even more dramatic. So let's see what that looks like if we make a quick animation. So I'm going to select my Suzanne head, hit I on my keyboard, choose Visual, Lock, Rotate, and Scale. Go to separate frame, frame 100. I'm going to grab this Suzanne head. Let's see, grab the Suzanne head and move it along the x-axis over here. And I'm going to hit I and set a keyframe. So now go back into the view of my camera, which is here, and I hit play. The Suzanne head's going to move and the camera's going to turn to track it. Now notice that it does not follow it. It does not follow it. Like if the head gets further away, it doesn't follow it. It just rotates in order to track it. That's the simple kind of tracking. It will rotate up and down and left and right, but it won't follow it. The camera itself stays in the same spot. Good. So you can also do this with lights. You can, if you wanted to track an object with lights, you could do the exact same setup. You would select the light, and you'd tell the light that you want to add an object constraint and track to the Suzanne head. Now it's going to be pointing at that. This is the wrong kind of light. Let me select a point light or a spotlight even. Well, point light. Select the same two axes, and now when I click the Suzanne head and move it, the light follows it. So the shadow stays with it, the light's following it, because I constrained it to it. Okay. Last thing to mention briefly, just a kind of a review, is that remember that when you are looking through your camera, you may have issues with clipping, and you want to make sure that with your camera selected, you choose your clip start to be very low, and you can increase your clip end if you want up to. Now this is going to help so that when you're zooming in on an object, you don't have it start to clip. So I could actually get inside of this without any clipping happening. All right, I think that's quite a lot for this video, so we'll end it there.